Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Modern Maze. I hope that everybody is doing well today. You're having a beautiful day, and that you've been well, and that you've been taking care of yourself, and that the year is absolutely flying by. Like, I cannot believe it's October already. Um, so, yeah, I hope you've been well, and that you're finding the space and the time to slow down a bit. Just take it in a little bit, sip it in. I am currently in Koh Samui, where I will be leaving tomorrow, actually. This concludes my time in Thailand, and I will be making my way straight to Varanasi in India, where I'm going to finally begin my big homecoming journey. This what this trip has really been built around, which is to connect. I would say reconnect, but to India. But that would imply that there ever was a connection. So it's to connect. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just go to the most intense city that I could possibly think of. From what I've heard, it's Varanasi. It's the oldest city in India, and it's really there's a intense spiritual energy that is in that place. And so, I thought, let's do it. Let's go straight into it. And so I will be in North India for about a month until the end of this month. And then I will be making my way back to my hometown, which is a place called Pune. It's near Mumbai, around 2 hours away, where I am going to be with my family to celebrate Diwali, which is the celebration of light. And it's always been one of my favorite times of the year, but I am beyond excited to be in India to celebrate that. You may hear in my voice that I'm still a bit sick. I got a tattoo last week, and I don't know what happened. My body just shut down, and I've just been sick for a week, it feels like. Slowly getting better. Those who know me know that I'm one of those chronically sick people. But I've actually been really good ever since I've started this holiday or this trip. It's been exactly 2 months now. And thought I was doing good, but yeah, kind of got knocked on my ass a little bit. So if you hear me sound a little bit energetically low or yeah, my words might struggle to get them out at times. It's because I'm dealing with that, and it's okay. I'm really excited about today's episode. This is an episode that I've been thinking about probably ever since I started this podcast, which was back in April. And what we're going to be talking about today is the rise of a philosophical belief or framework called dualism. And dualism can look in many different ways and many shapes and forms. But what I really want to talk about today and continue talking about is the fact that over the past couple of 100 years, we've kind of split our existence and our universe into these separate, unconnected parts. We see ourselves, humans, as being separate and different beings from all other creation. We see the environment, right, nature, as something different to ourselves. even in the language that we still use and the way we try and put dollar values on it, or commoditize it, or even talking about the environment and the terms, like the terminology of talking about nature inherently is a separation from us. Like, I am talking about nature and I'm talking about the environment, but is it actually separate from me? It's a question, something I've been thinking about. Modern medicine, and there's reasons that we're going to get into about this, but we also started to think of our mind and our body as being two completely separate things. Even within the mind, we start to dissect these little parts of our mind. So we have this existence, this universe, and we have all of these little ways that we've chopped it up and divided it and made sense of it. This way of splitting existence is known as dualism. And this refers to the idea or belief that reality is fundamentally divided into parts. Normally, we think of them as two different parts that are opposite in principle. And in various contexts, dualism acts as a division between different aspects of existence. And so we think of mind, body, human nature, as in mind separate to body, humans separate to nature. So what is the effect of this? How does this affect how we treat each other, our planet? How does it dictate how we view the nature of our soul? The way of viewing this this reality, this existence, and looking at the universe in this way has had benefits, which I want to talk about, but it's also had its negatives. Let's think about science and technology and the advancements that we've made in that, specifically over the last couple hundred years. Like, absolutely boomed what we've managed to do and figure out. So by breaking the world down into these manageable components, we've really been able to focus on these specific aspects of reality. And therefore, because we're very specifically looking at one aspect of reality, it has enabled us to rapidly accelerate our knowledge in these fields. So we think about physics, engineering, even medicine in some aspects as well, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So having that really, really laser focus on one aspect of reality does have its benefits. It also has its negatives. So instead of focusing on the whole and thinking about a holistic approach, and if we focus on individual parts, we can risk missing the intricate interdependent variables and relationships that sustain life in the universe. And that may lead to short-sighted solutions that can undermine the long-term well-being of both humanity and the planet. Now, we learn more every day, and we are advancing in a lot of these things. A good example of this is the use of pesticides. So when modern pesticides were discovered, hurrah, we can kill anything that's trying to eat these crops, and we can produce more. But what we know now is that using these things are not so good for our health. It's massive. It's in everything. It's in, we think about Roundup and all the other pesticides that are destroying our health, really, and the health of the planet as well, and the ecosystems and the soil quality. And it's just been such a negative in the long run. But that was when we started to look at, okay, what does it do as a whole, not just this manageable part, which is to remove pests. If you look at it in that way, it's a rousing success. It nukes everything. But sometimes we may get stuck in the very, very detailed view of what we're trying to achieve, and that we may forget the bigger picture. And that's a common theme throughout some of these examples that I'm going to give. If we think about medical progress, so separating physical health from mental health has allowed for targeted treatments in each area, leading to advancements in medical science that has helped save lives. But this division, again, overlooks the importance of the inherent interconnectedness of our mind and our body. And this has resulted in fragmented healthcare approaches that neglect holistic healing. So we live in a time now where individualism is at its highest in a lot of ways. And this separation between all of us and between individuals has fostered a strong sense of self and personal identity. And this encourages self-expression and personal freedom. How much of that is actually a facade is a conversation for another day. We live in a very individualistic lifestyle and community, specifically in the West. And I'm just thinking about my experience in Australia, but I really feel that there's so much isolation and disconnection from community, and as well as a weakening of collective responsibility. And this is something that I've really witnessed in Australia, especially in the aftermath of COVID lockdowns. Like, I really feel like it's gotten worse. This sense of everybody's an individual, but kind of not linking up anymore. It just feels like a lot of separate people. Human control over nature, so allowing us to treat nature as separate from humans has allowed us to be okay with resource extraction. And that has led to the comforts of modern life, such as food production and energy. But this mindset of seeing nature as something to dominate or control has given rise to practices that are exploitative, and they degrade ecosystems, they disrupt biodiversity, and they contribute to all of these environmental crises that are going on. So while there has been significant progress and awakening in global consciousness, including the interconnectedness of our world, like, I do see a growing recognition of this fact. And to me, it's inherently makes sense that we are more connected to everything than what we've been told to believe. And there's reasons for this that we're going to jump into. So while there has been significant progress in this, I'm thinking about, even naturopaths and the way that we've been looking at the environment, and the way that I know that there are specific organizations out there trying to rekindle people with nature and to foster that relationship again, as well as projects that bring men together, that bring women together, bringing the interconnectedness of everything together in all these different ways. We still really do remain in this dualistic state, and it runs deep. It's not something that is just surface level and something that we can necessarily just let go of like that, and that is super easy to shed. It really remains in our language, our definitions, our thinking. It may be subtle and may go completely unnoticed in everyday life, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening. I've been reading a bit of Alan Watts recently, and he has a poem that really resonated with me. We seldom realize that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own. For we think in terms of languages and images which we did not invent, but were given to us by society. We've been told that our mind is separate from our body. We are different from the rest of nature. We've been chosen by God. We are the chosen and special ones. That heaven is separate from earth, and that you are completely separated from me. How did we get here? Let's talk about it. So, for most of our history, human history, we had a deeply intimate relationship with the rest of the living world. We knew the names of everything in our surroundings. We understood how systems worked. We tied ourselves emotionally, socially, spiritually, and physically to the natural world. The art left hidden by ancestors around the world suggests that they believed in a spiritual interchangeability between humans and non-human beings. And we saw ourselves as a integral and connected part to the rest of the world. People lived in whole communities in which spiritual and material phenomena were not so different. They really placed a lot of heavy weight upon spiritual experiences and spirituality. It was a deep part of their practices, a deep part of them. People had this organic view of the world, and it was reflected in their perceptions of themselves and their relationship with the environment. We lived in this state that is known as participating consciousness. This is when we have a deep awareness that our lives are intertwined with the world around us. It's a recognition that me, as the observing being, is not separate from what we observe. Instead, the world is alive, filled with all of its own wisdom, and can be understood directly through lived experience, not necessarily through intellectual reflection. In this consciousness, there is no clear boundary between the mind and the world. Indigenous people understood this, and the fact that the support that the natural world provides must be repaid every day because they viewed themselves as one with the land, one with nature. So the first split in our existence began with the rise of empires and the European Enlightenment. This refers to an intellectual and cultural movement which spanned the late 17th and 18th centuries. This is a huge period for human thinking because, specifically European thought, it is the time when reason, science, and empirical evidence became the primary source of knowledge, in stark contrast to the religious, traditional, and even superstitious beliefs that had dominated the period before. It's a huge shift. This is how we think now in the world with reason, science, empirical evidence. And this was the period where this was born. This wasn't something that we've had for thousands upon thousands years, right? It's fairly recent. It's what, 17th and 18th centuries. That's a couple of hundred years ago. It's not that long, just a blink of an eye, really. But it's recent. And so in this new view, and this is the first split, is that we separated heaven and earth. So what we said is that there is two, like the world is split into two. We have a spiritual realm of gods that are in heaven, and that there is the rest of creation. There was a further split in this, which is that we had creation, which we'll call nature, and that humans are separate from nature. So in this view, humans were given a special place because we've been made in the image of gods themselves. And therefore, we have a right to rule over the rest of creation. This idea of dominion became firmer with the rise of transcendental religions and philosophies across the major civilizations. So across China, India, Europe, this went around. This came up in the world. In the book of Genesis, there's a quote here, and and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over everything that creeps upon the ground. This way of seeing the world was further emboldened by Plato, who is a very famous ancient Greek philosopher. He's one of the most influential figures in Western philosophy. And he built his whole philosophy on the idea of this transcendental realm, heaven, being separate from the earthly realm. The transcendental refers to the source of absolute truth and reality, the essence of things. But the material, the physical world, was nothing but a poor imitation, like a shadow. This idea came to inform the Christian notion of a spiritual heaven that contrasts a worldly realm of mere matter, and it's decaying, sinful, and passing away. That's how the world was viewed. Something big and profound happened actually back in the 1500s, and there were two powerful groups of European society who were worried about the revival of previous thinking, which they deemed as animistic, which is that like spiritual, that we are one with the earth, almost pagan in a way, the way that we used to think, the way that we had thought for who knows how long since then. There were two groups that were set out to destroy this way of thinking. The first one was the church. And as far as the church was concerned, the notion that spirit is present throughout the material world and a part of all of us, part of every tree, bird, etc., threatened their claim that they were the only conduits to the divine. If spirit is everywhere and everyone has access to spirit and nobody owns spirit, then that challenges the very notion that there are a group of people that are the only ones that can speak to the divine. This wasn't a problem just for the priests, but for the kings and the rulers who depended on the church for their power. If spirit is everywhere, then there is no God. If there is no God, there is no priest and no king. the divine right of kings crumbles into nothing. So this is a big problem for them. The second group is capitalists, of course. The good old, the good old capitalists just, yeah, just shown up everywhere. The new economic system that we have built, especially beginning after the 1500s, and we talked about the history of capitalism and what this is, what I'm about to describe here is the the philosophical thinking behind the actions that went on. So we've talked about enclosures, we've talked about colonialism, we've talked about everything that happened for capitalism to rise. But what we're going to talk about next is actually the philosophical beliefs that underpinned this shift in how we looked at how we looked at the world and each other, and how we began to treat Mother Earth. So this new economic system that was rising, it needed a new relationship with Mother Earth. It couldn't have the old one because it was too sentimental and it was too interconnected to us. This new system needed to be built on the principles of possession, extraction, commodification, and productivity. And in order to truly exploit something, you need to think of it as an object. If you think about the earth as a living organism and think about her as a mother, it's a pretty big ethical dilemma to carry out destructive acts against Mother Earth then. And so the relationship had to change and the definitions had to change. The ones who wanted to advance capitalism, they had to find a way to destroy this idea that Mother Earth was living and sacred, and instead make her a warehouse of natural resources for humans to take and exploit. Francis Bacon, who is hailed as one of the fathers of modern science, played a key role in shaping the scientific method. But behind his contributions, there's a darker legacy here. Bacon sought to replace the ancient view of nature as a nurturing mother with one of nature as a wild, chaotic force that needs to be controlled. Science, for Bacon, was a tool of domination. His harsh metaphors reveal his broader worldview. He saw nature as a rebellious force to be broken. And he was very, very influential and instrumental during this time. And so this is how he viewed nature. This vision of nature as something as lifeless, mechanical, and devoid of spirit was later expanded by René Descartes, who viewed the world as a living, nothing more than a machine of pumps, springs, and cogs, and it's been stripped of its soul. Descartes took Bacon's idea of dominating nature and pushed it further, arguing that such domination could only be justified if nature was seen as lifeless. He revived Plato's notion of a world split between mind and matter. He claimed that only humans possess minds or souls, and this is why we have a special link to God. While everything else, plants, animals, and the earth, was mere matter, devoid of spirit, intention, or agency. This view eventually was overthrown and challenged as scientists realized that this is not the truth. But like with many things that we talk about and ideas and cultural moments and in our terminology, this view has lingered that we are special and that we have a special link to God and the divine. Regardless of it being thrown out, I can still see that it's alive in our terminology and our views, that we believe this, that there is a belief that we are special. It's something that has been passed down, but it's just something to be aware of. And I don't know how much we've actually managed to completely rid ourselves of that belief throughout our society. So, this separation between humans and the natural world was an effort to strip away the ancient animist beliefs in the living, interconnected nature of the world. By the 1630s, these ideas had overtaken scientific thought, aligning science with the church's desire to remove spirit from nature. During the Enlightenment, these views became mainstream, laying the groundwork for the enclosure and privatization of common lands. With land viewed as an object separate from human identity, it could be possessed, exploited, and commodified. This divide between humans and the living world became firmly established. And in this new framework, beings and ecosystems were no longer sacred, they were commodities. In the 17th century, Isaac Newton, developed a complete mathematical formation of the new mechanical view of nature. So Newton designed the laws of motion and universal gravitation, and these formulas became the foundation of classical mechanics, which viewed the world as a well-ordered, predictable system governed by mathematical laws. It posed the most profound questions about the idea of God. And more scientific concepts were used to describe the explanation of the observable phenomena of the earth and the universe, the cosmos. Scientific reason was so overpowering, especially because it was in service of such a powerful social force, which is industrial wealth. The Newtonian universe was one huge mechanical system operating according to exact mathematical laws. The division between our our outer reality and our inner world was one of the most consequential philosophical transitions of human history. It really was. It changed the way that we think about ourselves and our place on earth. The ideas that were brought during the Enlightenment allowed the material benefits of the scientific industrial revolution, which transformed our outer world in ways that we had previously never imagined we could do. Pretty unimaginable what we've managed to do to the earth these last couple of hundred years. There's been advances and maybe there's some benefits in how we've been able to understand and control our external world. But it really has come at the cost of neglecting our inner lives. So our emotions, our intuition, our subjective experiences that may not be able to be quantified by scientific reason and modern science. Knowledge shifted from intuitive, experiential understanding to facts and calculations, prioritizing intellectual over participatory knowledge. The Enlightenment and capitalism reinforced this divide, focusing on self-interest and economic calculation, stripping away the moral and emotional consequences. Science and economics promoted a view of nature as something to be exploited rather than living and interconnected. The last separation that I want to talk about is the separation of our mind and body. So Descartes, the French philosopher, also argued that we are split into two distinct components, an immaterial mind and a material body. Now, because the body has been categorized as a thing of nature, so it was used as brute matter and could be used like a machine. His most famous phrase that you may have heard and know him by, which is, "I think, therefore I am," speaks to his theory that we are only the mind or reason, and that's the only thing that makes us. European elites took this view of dualism and specifically separating our mind from body and humans from nature and used it to reshape beliefs about labor. Before this, peasants worked in rhythm with nature, celebrating festivals and organizing their lives around sufficiency and desire. But this way of life, which was rich in joy and spontaneity, threatened the emerging capitalist system, which required constant productivity and labor. To enforce this shift, elites introduced brutal laws to force the dispossessed into obedience. The goal was to strip away any sense of connection to the land or to one's body, reducing both to mere objects of control and extraction. As Descartes had claimed the mind should dominate the body, so the ruling class sought to dominate labor and the natural world. The body, like nature, became mechanized, nothing more than a machine to extract labor. The pleasures of life, like joy and play, were cast as sinful, and poverty was rebranded not as a result of dispossession, but as a moral failing of that person. Over time, capitalist systems evolved to maximize productivity, stripping work of meaning, passion, and creativity. Workhouses and factories became tools of reprogramming, training the body to fit in a machine like order. Descartes' theories allowed labor, like nature, to be abstracted and commodified, separating human beings from their essential wholeness. This rigid division between mind and body, humans began to completely change the way that they understood themselves. It was a totally radical idea and one that lay at the middle of this modern mode of self awareness. It was the big step from us, separating our conscious minds from our deeper natures and the degradation of our essential relationships to the natural world. What were the big effects of these separations? The first one is the change in how we look at the earth. So, as we just learned, this new worldview emerged in the 1600s, separating nature from civilization and the human body from the self. And this allowed capitalists to objectify nature, pulling it into cycles of accumulation. As we know, elites seized commons in Europe and all over the global south during colonization, extracting resources, gold, silver, sugar, diamonds, without care for the land. And this came without compensation, without the true cost of plundering nature. In the colonies, this extended to labor as well. So enclosure and colonization enabled capitalists to extract cheap labor from Europe's workers and unpaid labor from women. This system produced the figure of the housewife. Within Descartes' dualistic framework, women were cast as closer to nature, controlled like the land themselves, with their unpaid labor hidden. The same logic applies to the colonies, where indigenous people and Africans were dehumanized and cast as part of nature, justifying their exploitation. Dualism enabled colonizers to objectify indigenous Africans and Americans, treating them as objects to be used. Because colonized resisted dualism. Indigenous people held these animist beliefs, seeing the earth as alive with agency and spirit. And this worldview was a challenge to capitalism. And so the European colonizers set to eradicate it. The civilizing missions were not just about political and economic control, but about controlling thought, about controlling colonized people's thoughts about themselves and the world. They sought to oppress this view and to control the mental universe of the colonized. We are all inheritors of a worldview that separates nature from humans. It's in our language. It forms things such as natural resources, a term like that, or raw materials. This dualist mindset seeps into our language, framing the living world with terms such as natural resources or raw materials, reinforcing the idea that nature exists to serve us. We treat waste, pollution, and even climate change as something external because the prevailing assumption, or has been, is that what happens to nature is somehow separate from our lives. Descartes once declared that the aim of science is to make ourselves the masters and possessors of nature. 4 centuries later, this ethic still dominates our culture. We not only see nature as separate from us, but something that must be conquered. So, what has been the change in how we look at ourselves? Modern economics, like we've talked about in our donut economics episode, relies on the concept of this isolated individual termed Homo economicus who exists to maximize personal welfare. At the heart of economics stands the portrait of a rational economic man who has told us that we are self interested, isolated, calculating, and dominant over nature. And it's really shaped who we have become. In this view, we are reduced to utility seeking agents, and we're only focused on acquiring external goods to satisfy desires. But we are not just a calculating machine. That's not what you are. That's not what I am. We are complex, emotional, and relational beings connected to each other and the larger web of life. Yet economics, that was actually born from this mechanical worldview of enlightenment, denies this wholeness, fragmenting it and fragmenting our experience into parts that can be quantified. Neoclassical economics insists on objectivity, dismissing the emotional and spiritual dimensions of human existence as invalid. But this rejection of feeling and intuition is not a product of rational thought, right? It's a fear-driven retreat into the intellect, into safety, into our safeguards and our safety railings. The need to detach from our emotions has shaped modern economics, turning it into an intellectual response to a deeper fear of vulnerability and interconnectedness. Like there is something vulnerable about that. The fact that I am not just here and I can stand on my own forever and I'm not connected to anything else and I can dominate anything I want and I'm calculating and rational and clear-headed. But there's something vulnerable about being so inherently tied to the universe, nature, each other, and this fear-driven retreat into this economic figure and our intellect has caused an incomplete, fragmented understanding of ourselves and our world. In truth, The essence of what it means to be a human lies in wholeness, not the isolated mind seeking control of everything, but in the integration of our hearts, our mind, spirit, deeply intertwined with the living earth. Modern economics thrives on the illusion of detachment and claims that rationality and objectivity should govern all of our human decisions. However, this emotionless approach is not it's not devoid of feeling. Like if I am to make a clear, rational economic decision, it's not it's not that there isn't any emotion in that. It's not that it's completely devoid of emotion and feeling. It's actually driven by the need for psychological security and control. There is emotion in it. It's just not what we may think it is. Like, how rational is actually a rational decision? What are the actual thoughts and feelings in the body and mind when somebody is making that decision to be so detached? Is being so detached from feelings and emotions a feeling within itself, like an emotion within itself? To be detached from everything, is that a feeling? Or is it just nothing? I don't think it's nothing. I don't think that's how it works. The deeper tragedy of modern economics and our society and our world today is the refusal to acknowledge other forms of awareness and rationality. Economics, we've reduced the human experience to the pursuit of material goods. Like, that is what I want to do, what I need to do, what makes me happy. Ignoring the profound, mysterious processes that shape our inner well being. There's something powerful in the fact that despite everything that has been done to us spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, despite all of the forces that are working to suppress this and to lock this away and to shut it away, we are capable of accessing these higher states of consciousness that reveal the sacredness of life, because it's something that we are born with and it's not something that goes away. And despite whatever society and our structures may want for us and want us to think and want us to believe, it cannot be suppressed by the forces of this rationality. The symbolic and the numinous world, our deep inner worlds, it cannot be suppressed. So to move beyond the economist within is to transcend this ego identity and rediscover the sacredness that's embedded in daily life. By doing so, we can reconnect with the numinous and the sacred and embrace a more holistic, integrated relationship with the world, a relationship that honors both the intellect and the soul, the profound and the sacred. Oof. I was powered up by my iced latte. Um, like when you have just the right amount of coffee, and it's like it's like a tightrope for me between anxiety and productivity, and the anxiety helps actually in a way, but yeah, um, definitely felt the power of the caffeine in that. I'm gonna try and wrap this episode up soon. It's been a long one, but I want to talk about the essence of the universe and existence. And when I was writing this bit, I had a moment where I was thinking to myself, am I really about to talk about what reality is. But it makes sense to me and the modern maze, and exploring every single part of this maze. And so, what actually is existence and reality is interesting to me and something that I continue to explore. And so, the disclaimer here is that this is based on what I know, what I've researched, what I believe as well, and that I'm not an expert in this. And so if anybody has any, not even corrections, but anything you'd like to add, anything that I've missed, anything I should read, I'm more than happy to take all of that on and to start the conversation. And I'm sure this is not the first time that we're going to dive into this topic, but I've been waiting for this moment. I knew that we were going to get to this point where we were going to talk about spirituality and what all of this actually is. And so I'm glad that it's finally here. Let's talk about it. So you may know this already, probably already know this already, but at the very basic core, the universe is one continuous field of energy. It can also be described as a continuous field of light. What do I mean by this? So we've known for a long time, but we also know now from science, specifically quantum physics, that everything from the chair that you are on right now to the air that you breathe off is made of atoms. And in quantum physics, this is known as the quantum field, which is essentially that everything in the universe is a vast interconnected sea of energy. So if we think about these atoms are made of even smaller particles. So you have electrons, protons, and neutrons. And all of these particles are constantly moving. They're constantly moving. There's never a moment that they don't stop. And so the constant motion and interaction of these particles generates energy, right? It's moving, so there's a force. So the constant motion and interaction of these particles is generating energy constantly. And so everything in the universe is vibrating, and it's a form of vibrating energy, and it's constantly vibrating. It's not stopping. And so these vibrations radiate energy out and interacts with the surrounding particles, creating an interconnected web of energy throughout the universe. Much like ripples on a pond, every action, thought, or movement actually sends out waves of energy. In essence, everything is part of a vast, unified field of vibrating energy. Every single part of the universe is linked in a cosmic dance of energy that is whole and inseparably connected. So science knows this, but spirituality and spirituality beliefs and practices have known about this for a long, long time, often describing the universe as a unified field of light. And many spiritual traditions speak to the interconnectedness of life. In the Upanishads, which is the foundational text of Hinduism, It describes Brahman, which is the ultimate reality, as an encompassing light, the source from which all other forms arise from and return to. Aboriginal Australians spiritually view the universe as a vast field of interconnected light and energy. In Taoism, the concept of qi is foundational, and it's often viewed as a pervasive, luminous energy that flows through all things, maintaining balance and harmony in the universe. On a more metaphysical level, light is often used as a symbol for consciousness or the animating essence of the universe. Spiritual traditions point to the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected through this field of light. From a mystic's perspective, the physical world is not separate from this underlying energy, but is a manifestation of it. All right, let's talk about an example. I love a good example about vibrations. So, my voice in your ears right now, it's all vibrations. When I'm speaking right now, my vocal cords are vibrating, and that creates sound waves. This is a form of mechanical energy. Inside my microphone here is a mechanical diaphragm that is vibrating in response to the sound waves in my voice. And that is connected to a mechanism, often like a coil of wire that's near a magnet, that converts these vibrations into electrical energy. Now, the electrical signal, which contains my voice, is transmitted into digital data. These codes have now traveled through your device by the internet, and we're still in an electrical energy form. Now, as you're listening to my voice right now, either through headphones or your speaker, this process is happening in reverse. So your speakers or headphones have diaphragms of their own. Now the electrical signal flows through a voice coil, which is wrapped around a magnet. And as the electrical current comes in and vibrates, it causes the diaphragm to vibrate. And now it's converted back to mechanical engineering. I keep on saying mechanical engineering. Mechanical energy. As these waves now enter your ear, they cause your eardrum to vibrate in a pattern that matches my original sound wave. Now, inside your ear, right now, the vibrations from the eardrum are being transmitted via these tiny bones to the cochlea, which is like, think of it as it's like a little structure that's filled with fluid. And it's got like thousands of little hair cells on it. So now as these vibrations ripple, the hair cells bend and send neural signals to the brain via the auditory nerve. So now we have transformed into electrical impulses within your nervous system. Your brain has now processed these signals as sound and has reconstructed my voice. It was just vibrations the whole time. And at every step, I hope this shows you that energy can flow and transform. And the fact that my voice reaches your ear is vibrations, and it's vibrations that are transforming, vibrations that are flowing, and we're connected. We're connected vibrationally. So why do we talk about this and bring this up? we've talked about the great separation, dualism, all of these different ways of looking at the earth and us and the universe and what that has done for us and meant for us. But it is far from what I believe is the truth, which is that our entire existence and universe is one continuous stream of energy. That means that everything that exists is interconnected more deeply than we may even fully understand. There is technically no separation between you and the person right next to you, you and the tree you lay under, or the earth that you walk upon. We are all connected at a deeper foundational level than what our eyes, our ears, our mouth may convey to us. I'm going to pause the spirituality talk for today. Love to continue discussing it and maybe even get some guests on to talk about it. But to wrap up, we can view the world in many ways. We can look at ourselves in many ways. We can look at each other in many ways. But how connected actually are we all? Or how separate are we from each other? Are we more tied to each other than we may realize? I think yes. And I think going back to source is going back to this understanding that I am one with earth, I am one with you, I am one with the universe. There is no separation. I am that. There is no separation between my mind and body. It is one. I think that that's a pretty big step that we as a society need to begin working towards, that understanding. And not even just the understanding, but then the reorganization of what we do in this world and this reality to accommodate that and to actually honor that. It's not enough to just say it. It's a good first step. Like, let's get there first, where we're saying it. But what are we doing about it, and how are we reorganizing the world around it? Because right now it's very boxed and very separate, and we need to start thinking of these things holistically: environmental problems holistically, social problems holistically, medical, everything, which is there. The change is happening, which I'm really happy to see, and the change will continue happening. It will happen. I trust that this shift in consciousness will happen. Thank you for joining me today. It is really nice to finally do this episode and to talk about these things. And I really feel like there is such a strong energy to pursue this line of thinking within this podcast and within our conversations, is to foster this interconnectedness, because the separation is what I believe such a root cause for where the world is at right now. Separation and disconnect within ourselves, with each other, with nature, and how do we go towards fostering the rebuilding of that across everything? How do we foster the interconnectedness is, I think, such a big part of our story and a big part of our journey, individually, collectively, as we navigate this maze. and our modern world. I would like to announce that I have created a newsletter. I'm using a platform called Substack, and for a while now, I have been really wanting to start to branch out in other forms of media. So for times where I'm not able to record, or there are little things that I want to talk about, stories I want to share, just to continue the discussion, to continue navigating the modern maze, but branching out into other forms of media and other ways to deliver this. So I've created a Substack, which is a newsletter page, and I intend on writing more and sending it out. There is a link that will be in the description of this video, which is to sign up to the newsletter. So if you're interested, please, I would really appreciate that. You don't have to worry about me spamming. As you can see, by the frequency, even of these episodes, I like to take my time. I'm going to find a way to just have a shortened, condensed, written version of what each episode is, and send that as well as a reminder when a new episode comes out. So, it's exciting trying to branch out to other things. The first newsletter that I've written, which will be live on the Substack by the time this episode comes out, is a short story about somebody who lives in Melbourne, and it has been exactly 1 year since the COVID lockdowns have ended in Melbourne. And this particular person believes that they are over lockdown and that they have moved on emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And the short story, it asks that question. Are you really over it? Or have you just forgotten? So again, link is in the description. Would really appreciate it. And I appreciate you for joining me again. Maybe a little bit until we speak next. I've got a couple of guest interviews that are lined up for October. But October is going to be a lot of more traveling and being on the road and being spontaneous than what these first 2 months have been, where I've just for a majority of the time have been in one place. And so I hope that you take care of yourself, look after yourself, sending you all the love in the world. And I will speak to you next time. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Namaste.